Well, good morning, everybody. It's March 18th, 2020, and I'm Jim Hodson. I'm the Executive Director of the Fort Worth Aviation Museum, and we're here for the first ever go-live presentation of Fun with Aviation, Fun with Airplanes. We're going to do some walk-arounds on a couple of airplanes today that you folks have asked to see. We figured just because we're closed down because of the coronavirus doesn't mean that we can't have an opportunity for some of you to enjoy some of the collection that we have here. And we're going to start with the favorite airplane. So I'm going to turn it around because you don't really need to see me. We are inside the CH-53 Sea Stallion. This is a Sikorsky helicopter. They were first built first flight was in 1964. They were used or designed and built for the Marine Corps that was looking for a heavy lift aircraft. We're inside the cargo bay on this right now, and as you can see, we have some bench seats on the left-hand side. Those were for the troops. You could put 38 to 55 troops in here, depending on the configuration. And up in the up left corner, and I'll show you a little bit more of this in a bit, we have a stretcher to represent this airplane being used for stretchers or for a hospital evacuation. They could put up to 24 stretchers in the airplane. You'll also notice that it's big and open. You could put a Jeep in here. You could put a howitzer, 105 recoilless rifles in here, or 106 106 rifles, recoilless rifles. We've also had VWs in here. We had a Ferrari in here. We've had some other people that have put their cars in here from time to time. You also notice we've got a big white table here. We have started using the helicopter for birthday parties because, as I mentioned, this is the favorite airplane out here of all of the young people who come out. I'm going to turn around and give you an opportunity to see a little bit of the cockpit. Two pilots would operate this helicopter. The person on the right-hand side was referred to as the HAC, or the Helicopter Aircraft Commander, as opposed to a commercial airliner where the captain's on the left. The Helicopter Aircraft Commander was on the right. You notice these big, heavy sheets on the side of the seats. That's the armor plating. That was about the only thing that the pilots had to protect themselves. And here's a little bit better view of that. So you can see all the instrumentation in here. And this is what we kind of refer to as steam gauges. This is old analog gauges on this. Center console had a lot of the radios and those types of things. And the controls on the left and on the right, and the stick in the middle controlled the plane in flight. Usually had two other crew members here. Usually had a gunner on this side, and also a door gunner here on the other side of the airplane. Now the crews with the more modern CH-53s, it's usually a loadmaster or crew chief, and sometimes an aerial observer. I want to show you one interesting thing on the floor here. You see this big yellow panel. When that's opened, they could go ahead and use the skylift or use a hoist to hoist things and carry things externally on the helicopter, whether that was cargo or jeeps or any number of different things. It could be used for search and air rescue and a lot of different items. So as we're going to walk out the back of the helicopter, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it because this helicopter is actually very special. This helicopter has a name, and this one is called Patches. And I'm going to show you why it's called Patches here in just a second. This helicopter normally flew at about 170 miles an hour, not very fast. The number up there, it says CH-53D. This is actually a CH-53 Alpha that has been converted into a D. What that means is, so first of all, the C stands for cargo. The H stands for helicopter. The 53 is the model number, and D is the version. They came out of the factory as A's. Now the number 153715 is referred to as a bureau number. All Navy and Marine Corps aircraft have what's referred to as a bureau number, which identifies it. That number is only used on this particular aircraft. Every aircraft has its own individual number. This was a Marine helicopter, although the Air Force flies them in a different version, in the Jolly Green Giant version, and also a number of other countries operate this airplane. Germany, Israel, even Iran has had them. Right underneath the big rotor blades is a structure that's generally referred to as the doghouse, just because it covers up the engine and transmission, or the transmission on this one. Show you a couple of interesting things. I want you to first of all notice all these little squares on the side of the sponson here. All those little squares. I'm going to tell you what those are in just a second. Mention that this one is special because it was used as a trainer, and I'm going to tell you why in a second. So this plexiglass is not normally on a helicopter, but this was so when it was used for training, the people who were undergoing training could see what it looks like inside the fuel tank. So the white thing on the left-hand side is a probe so that you could tell how much gas you had in that tank. So we mentioned this is patches. It is patches because of all these little patches. Now these little patches, and there's 251 of them, and some of them are underneath, came from this airplane being hit by an RPG in Da Nang in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. They continued to fly the airplane afterwards, even with the holes in it, but then patched it up and sent it to Tennessee, to a place called Millington, Tennessee, which was a training base, maintenance trainer for all of the Marine Corps and the Navy and the Coast Guard. Now I want you to look at the air scoops on the left-hand side of the engine up there. You notice that it's open to the engine. You'll also notice the sponson is just a single item. This side of the airplane is an A model. When it came to Millington, it was an A model. But since this was going to be a trainer, the Navy and Marine Corps decided that they were going to turn this into a D model. So you can see right here, up there on the scoops on the engines, the one on the left-hand side is open to the engine, and the one on the right-hand side has what we refer to as a strainer, or a sand strainer. These came about because of an operation to try to rescue hostages in Iran. And when the helicopters went down in the desert to try to land, they sucked up a lot of sand. So they started to put these strainers on the engines so that the engines could operate in those kind of conditions. Now, you'll notice the name here, Sergeant Mike Amtar, Ol Me. Mike is one of our volunteers here, and he is the one that takes care of the care and feeding of this airplane. You'll also notice a big tank. You can see the sponson right there, which is just identical to the one on the other side. But we also have this big tank here, and this is a drop tank. So this would extend the range of the airplane considerably. The airplane is 88 feet long. The rotors, and these are big rotors, they also have to be careful under SAR, search and rescue operations over the water, that they stay away from the swimmers a little bit, because the downblast on these rotors is sufficient to push people underwater. But the rotors are 72 feet, and it's 24 feet tall. And I mentioned it's empty weight, or the weight without any fuel or troops or anything, is 24,000 pounds, and the weight limit, the loaded weight, is about 33,000 pounds. One of the things that the Marine Corps needed this for in Vietnam was that at that point in time they didn't have any real heavy lift helicopters in the middle 60s. So if a helicopter like a Huey or a Cobra or any of the other smaller helicopters went down, there was no way to bring the fuselage back out until they got the CH-53, the Sea Stallions, and then they were able to pick up the weight of a downed helicopter, 46, a Huey, even the Cobras and other airplanes, and be able to bring the airframe back for possible use. Mentioned it cruises at 150, maximum speed is 170. It can have a service ceiling of about 17,000 feet. It's not pressurized, obviously, with the back end open like that. Combat radius of about 100 nautical miles and a range of about 550. One of the things that its climb rate is about 2,500 feet per minute. There's also an emergency climb rate on this that is quite a bit more than that. I'm going to tell a story on myself. When I first got to my first squadron in the Marine Corps, I flew OV-10s. And OV-10 was not considered a fighter by any stretch of the imagination, but sometimes in the OV-10 we'd want to go out and fight against each other. Sometimes we'd find a helicopter, and I was out there as a young lieutenant, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to dive on this CH-53. He's easy. I'll be able to get an imaginary kill off of this CH-53. much to my surprise, as soon as the helicopter saw me, was able to go into the emergency climb, which is about 18,000 feet per minute. And he just zoomed way up above me, and there was no chance at all of me being able to catch him. One of the other unique things about this helicopter is that it was the first helicopter to be able to do a barrel roll and also do a loop. In fact, if you look on YouTube and look for CH-53 loops and rolls, you'll be able to see some of the video of this airplane actually doing that. First time ever that was accomplished in a helicopter. So the wheels on this, once it's airborne, they retract. The tail retracts. And we also have a tail skid right here that also retracts. When it's on the ground, it's usually down, and it's to keep the airplane from hitting the tail. But we had to mechanically raise it so that people didn't bump their head on it getting in and out of the helicopter. So we'll take one more quick walk through. And again, like I mentioned, this is the favorite helicopter here, the favorite airplane, mostly because people can get inside and walk around and see what it's like in this big thing. We see them fly, but nobody ever sees what's inside. Not sure if I mentioned it, but recently we added electricity to the helicopter, so we have lights in it now, and we have an air conditioner. It won't cool it off because it's not airtight, but it will provide some airflow in here because we started using this for birthday parties last month. So that's just one of the other things we do here. And here's Mike Amtower. Mike Amtower as a young Marine in Vietnam. And there's Mike Amtower today as one of our volunteers here at the museum. So that's about all for the CH-53. We're going to go ahead and the next airplane we're going to look at, since it's right next door, is our F-14 Tomcat. We had a lot of requests to see that. We had requests to see this airplane, the Tomcat, our A7, the A12, and the T-28. And we're going to try to do these little video walkarounds maybe a couple times a week. Try to do them on Wednesdays and probably on Saturdays. And we'll just see how y'all like them. So what we've got right here is a F-14 Delta. In fact, this F-14 Delta is the longest serving F-14 ever. I remember I talked to you a little bit about bureau numbers. We're going to take a look at the bureau number on this airplane. You'll notice right there it says F-14D, so this is a fighter. F for fighter. 14 is the model number, and D is the series number. And so its bureau number, much like the 53, in this case 159600. There's no real sequence in these. They were sequenced by type, but not by date. The Army and the Air Force use a different method of doing that. And VF-31. VF-31 is a Navy fighter squadron. It's a fixed wing fighter squadron. And I know that because the V stands for fixed wing or airplane. It's from the French, Volar, I believe it is, but it's French because this goes back to the original World War I flying. There were fixed wing airplanes, and they were all called airplanes, and so they started with the squadrons were all with V's. F means that this is a fighter squadron. 31 means it's fixed wing fighter squadron 31. And now I could show you a difference in this, that we know this one is a Navy one because it doesn't have an M in the name. Now helicopters came along later, that's why they have H's, but you'll also notice with things like rigid airships, they are numbered with a Z because of the Zeppelins of the Germans. So airships were Z's, and then other normal aircraft were V's. Now let's see, this is just some more tail markings on this airplane. This one's special too, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But just here's some of the designations. Golden Anchor in 2005. Weapons Squadron in 2005 and the Arleigh Burke Fleet Trophy in 2005. And then there's the insignia for the Tomcat, which is the Tomcat right there. And you may have noticed in some of the early squadron patches, if you're familiar with that it sometimes said "Anytime, baby." Well, that comes from when this airplane was being designed, along with the Air Force's F-15 was being designed about the same time. And so the idea was the F-14 was ready to take on the F-15 anytime. Now, this is a swing-wing airplane. It was the first swing-wing airplane that the Navy had. It was in competition somewhat with the airplane next door, which is an F-111. The Navy looked at a General Dynamics version of the F-111 for shipboard use, but it was determined to be too heavy. So these wings, in the position they're in now, this is the stowed position. In flight, they could swing out so that they would go forward and become more of almost a straight wing airplane. They'd go back when they were in a fighting mode or needed to go fast to reduce drag. But the reason that the swing wings would come out is that these airplanes landed on aircraft carriers. And the whole science of aircraft carriers is that you can't be landing on an aircraft carrier at 150 or 160 miles an hour. It's just too difficult. So the aircraft carrier moves into the wind at about 30 miles an hour, which reduces that speed across the ground from 150 to maybe 120. And then if you've got the ability to go straight wing and go with some high lift devices on the airplane can slow down further, so that by the time it's actually coming across the ramp on the on the aircraft carrier, it may only be doing 100 miles an hour or so. So it makes it much more controllable around the aircraft carrier and much safer. So under the wings, we don't have anything, because this airplane would sometimes carry wing stations, and it would carry pods like lantern pods, which were low light tracking and navigation pods. We do have a infrared sensing pod here with a camera, which were also used for target acquisition and tracking. We've got the gun right here, although we don't have any guns in any of our airplanes here. But that's where the gun would be. Maximum speed on this airplane, 2.34 Mach. That's pretty fast. That's pretty fast in anybody's language. So here's the intake of the engine. We have no engines in these airplanes either. But you can see this ramp up here at the top. Depending on how fast or slow you were going, that ramp opened up and allowed air to dump out over the top of the wing. And it also controlled the amount of air coming into the engines. And so that's very important depending on the speed that you're going and whether you're supersonic or not. All this intake is doing is controlling the airflow into the engine so that the air is coming straight in as much as possible. Now, pitot tubes. These are called pitot-static tubes. What they do is they measure the air force coming into the airplane from outside. If I find a static port, I'll show you that. So that's showing you the dynamic speed of the airplane through the air. There's also another, what's referred to as a static port, which is on the side of the airplane, and that's a place where there's no movement of air at all. And so the airplane is able to sense the differences of the two, and from that it can tell how fast it's going and how high it's going. This other little pointy one is an angle of attack indicator. And what the angle of attack is the airplane relative direction to the wind that's coming across. So angle of attack is used very much around the aircraft carrier, so that you're at the right slow speed that you need to have to be able to come aboard the boat. It's also in other uses used to be able to tell whether you're fast or slow, so that you don't have to be looking at numbers inside the cockpit, and so that you can know how precisely you're flying the airplane. But angle of attack becomes very important, especially around the boat. Now, Christine. Some of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the Stephen King book of Christine, and that's pretty much where this comes from. And that had to do with a car that kept coming back. Well, this one is kind of the same way. This airplane had leaks hydraulic and fuel leaks almost its entire career. The leaks got to the point where they only allowed the airplane to be flown by senior pilots who were very familiar with the airplane and the systems. And this went on for a long time. Got to the point where they never were able to find the leaks or be able to determine why it was using it up. And so for a while, Christine was a hangar queen, which meant it was in the hangar most of the time and didn't fly. But then later on, they continued to fly it. So it came to us about 11 years ago now. Came to us in a C-5A. So we sometimes joke about the fact that Christine, the last crew that flew Christine was an Air Force crew, but they'd taken the wings and the tails off, and the airplane was put inside of a C-5A in Oceana, and they took off to bring it here. Now the airplane had been stripped of all of its internal reservoirs, so there was no active hydraulics, no active fuel, no active fluids of any sort in the airplane. It was certified to be dry, so that the Air Force could take it on the C-5. Well, as soon as they took off, Christine, in a final act of defiance, started to leak again. In fact, by the time the Air Force took it back into Oceana and cleaned it up, they cleaned up 22 gallons of fluid that came out of this airplane. About the best we can figure is that the fluids somehow were getting trapped in voids in the airplane, and so that's why it continued to have problems. So you'll notice this is one of our signs. We're in the process of redoing the signs, but Christine is fairly famous. As we mentioned, it's the longest serving F-14, and so here at the museum we give the airplanes ribbons based on what actions it took place in, and so obviously there's a meritorious unit citation, National Defense Ribbon. It flew in Vietnam. They flew in Kosovo, Afghanistan, and Iraq. And one of the important things about Kosovo is this airplane was used Okay, I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing a mute button. I apologize for that. But again, this is kind of new to all of us. So, since we apparently lost sound, I'm going to go ahead and end this little demonstration today. If you like this, please let us know, and we'll see about doing some more of this. And we've got a couple other airplanes that we think we'll take a look at probably on Saturday. And we'll probably do this at noon on Saturday. So for all of you that have kind of tuned in here today, thanks for visiting with us. Oh, sound is back, I'm being told. Okay, great. So for all of you that tuned in today, thanks. We appreciate you joining us with this. Hope you will come back again and tell us what airplanes you want to see, or if there's things inside the museum that you'd like to take a look at. So thanks for being with us today, and y'all be safe, keep your distance, wash your hands, and we're looking forward to a time when we can have you all out here at the museum. Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.